Restaurants can be one of the most challenging public areas for employers, employees, and guests when it comes to limiting the transmission of pathogens. The high amount of touch points, person-to-person contact, and the handling of food are just some of the factors that make restaurants uniquely susceptible to a wide variety of pathogens. When sitting at a restaurant, we think about the delicious food, the company we bring, and the fun atmosphere. But it's important to note the diligent work that goes into maintaining a safe dining environment. Frequent sanitation is absolutely vital to the health and safety of each guest. Just as we wouldn't reuse a fork or a spoon for different people, we should make sure the table and the guest's entire space is clean and prepared for their enjoyment. In restaurants, there is the possibility of finding all types of pathogens, so it is important to practice a variety of mitigation efforts by cleaning surfaces, cooking food at the right temperature, keeping food at the right holding temperature, using disinfectants frequently, as well as using clean sponges and towels, and ensuring restrooms are always equipped with soap and paper products. Using COVID-19 as an example, restaurants are perhaps the most uniquely affected space we will discuss today. Since SARS-CoV-2 is a pathogen transmitted through the air, normal sanitation methods are still effective, but are not enough to prevent the spread. This is why mask wearing and social distancing have become common practices in our everyday lives. But what about in a restaurant? Restaurants are full of people eating, drinking, and talking, requiring their mask be removed from their face. Since we cannot rely on masks to prevent the spread of airborne pathogens, restaurants have to focus on another means of keeping their guests safe: distancing. Creating distance among guests is a restaurant's best defense at preventing the spread of SARS-CoV-2. Preventing this pathogen from spreading can happen by either spacing tables, keeping customers from separate parties 6 feet apart, or by removing some of the tables from the restaurant and lowering the occupancy of the dining area. Other ideas include encouraging guests to only dine with members of their household or setting up a dining area outside, if your restaurant can accommodate. Barriers such as plexiglass shields are another effective measure to protect those in the restaurant. It is all of our responsibility to do our best to mitigate the spread of pathogens. Where there is no exposure, there is no risk. However, even a slight exposure presents some risk. Implementing as many measures as possible to eliminate the spread of pathogens in your restaurant is quite simple and benefits everyone. Guests should not go to a restaurant if they are feeling ill or have a confirmed, possible, or suspected infection. Remember, you can be asymptomatic. As individuals, when we fall ill, we put everyone around us at risk, so we should try to be as cautious as possible. This goes for COVID-19, but also for other illnesses. If the guest still goes to the restaurant, they should keep their face covered at all times unless eating or drinking, and should not meet with large groups. Employees should be aware of the risks they pose to guests and practice proper hygiene and safe health practices because of it. In a restaurant, servers handle people's food and dishes, potentially fostering pathogen spread. Cooks and chefs must also make sure they are cooking food at the correct temperature for the correct amount of time to make sure foodborne pathogens are killed. Each person in a restaurant has some kind of contact with the customer and should always consider the ways in which they could potentially mitigate the spread of pathogens. As an employee, you should be aware of possible sources of transmission in your life outside of work and understand you could be asymptomatic at any time. Be sure to wash your hands frequently and treat every guest as if they are more vulnerable to infection. Be brave and communicate your health and vaccination status to your employer. And lastly, do not go to work if infected or suspected to be infected. As employees in a restaurant, you should take a holistic approach to mitigating the risk of spread. What factors make you more or less likely to spread pathogens? Have you been recently exposed to a pathogen or infected? Has someone in your home or life outside of work been infected? Are you vaccinated? These factors are vital to consider when working with guests. As the person in charge, much of the responsibility to keep employees and guests safe falls on the employer. Thankfully, there are many ways you can mitigate the spread of pathogens in your workplace. Of course, restaurant management and owners should already be aware of what sanitizing products should be used and have a clear policy for how and when they should be used. But as an employer, you should also strongly consider requiring the COVID-19 vaccine for yourself and your employees, as well as enforcing other public health measures like hand washing and mask wearing. This will ensure the health of your team and your patrons. Employers should be supportive of employees who call in sick and be proactive in preparing for that. You can do this by making sure your employees in the restaurant are cross-trained. Employers should also encourage or require guests to practice similar public health measures for everyone's safety. Lastly, employers should set up their space to maintain distance, create barriers, and have proper airflow to minimize exposure. Remember, no exposure means no health risk, which should be our goal.